Some people are born into love. Others spend their whole lives trying to earn it. I wasn't the golden child. I wasn't the one they celebrated. But what if I told you that everything they ignored became the fuel for something greater?
This is not just a story about pain.
It's a story about rising anyway. If you've ever felt invisible, unworthy, or like you didn't matter, this story is for you. And if you want to hear more powerful, emotional stories like this one, make sure to subscribe to the channel and stay tuned, because today's story will stay with you long after it ends. Hi, my name is Ava Morgan, and I'm 22 years old. I grew up in a small town in Michigan, in a house that looked like it belonged on a postcard. 2 stories, white shutters, a front lawn our mother was proud of, and a porch swing that creaked just right in the summer breeze. But behind that picture-perfect image was a home divided not by conflict, but by preference. My younger sister Emily was the favorite, adored, supported, celebrated. And I was tolerated. I wasn't neglected in the obvious ways. I was clothed, fed, and sent to school. But the emotional distance, the lack of interest, the way I was never chosen, that cut deeper than silence. My father, Daniel Morgan, was a man of numbers. He worked as an accountant, and though he rarely raised his voice, his expectations were cold and calculated. Everything in his world boiled down to return on investment, even parenting. My mother, Margaret Hayes, taught English at the local high school. She loved order, manners, and appearances. She quoted Shakespeare at the dinner table and reminded us often that a daughter is a reflection of her mother's success. And in her eyes, only one of us ever shined back properly: Emily. Emily was 2 years younger than me, but from the moment she was born, it was as if the spotlight of the entire household had shifted. She was golden-haired, bright-eyed, and talented in all the ways that drew attention. She sang at school plays, won spelling bees, and made friends effortlessly. Every report card, every certificate, every accomplishment was met with celebrations and photos and hugs.
Me?
I was quiet. I liked to draw, to read, to sit under trees and think. I didn't demand attention. I didn't create a spectacle. And so I became the background in my own home. Christmas mornings were always the same: Emily tearing open the latest tech gadgets or boutique accessories, while I carefully unwrapped budget sketch pads and basic school supplies. Art is nice, Mom would say dismissively, but Emily's talents need real encouragement. At first, I thought it would change. That if I just worked harder, spoke louder, did better, they'd see me. But no matter what I achieved, it was never enough to break through that wall. I joined school competitions, won awards in business clubs, and aced my exams. Still, at home, conversations revolved around Emily, her rehearsals, her friendships, her little triumphs at school. Even when I was acknowledged, it was with that shallow smile of obligation, not pride. But there was one person who saw me differently: my Dottie, Martha Anderson. My father's mother. She lived by the lake in a cozy little house that smelled like tea leaves and old books. Every summer, I'd stay with her for a few weeks, and those were the weeks I came alive. Dottie didn't compare me to Emily. She didn't dismiss my interests. She sat with me on the dock as I sketched the trees and water, her warm hand resting on mine. "You see things in ways others don't, Ava," she told me one afternoon, watching as I shaded the reflection of the sky on the lake. "Never let anyone tell you your vision isn't enough." In her home, I found books about self-made women, entrepreneurs, thinkers, artists who built legacies from nothing. Dottie would read with me, listen to my ideas, and encourage me to think bigger. She planted the seed that I didn't have to be chosen by others. I could choose myself. I didn't have to fit into the mold Emily had filled so perfectly. I could break it and build something new. By the time I entered high school, I had stopped waiting for fairness. I knew where I stood in our family. Emily was the show. I was the understudy no one needed. So I turned my focus inward. I joined the business club, the math league, and signed up for every financial and entrepreneurial program the school offered. I didn't care about recognition anymore. I wanted results. I wanted to prove, to myself if no one else, that I could do something real. My math teacher, Mr. Rivera, noticed early. He pulled me aside after a regional business simulation and said, "Ava, you think in blueprints. You don't just dream, you structure. That's rare." He even called home to tell my parents how exceptional I was. My mother's reply? "That's nice. Can you remind Ava to pick up Emily's theater costume tomorrow?" I knew then that praise wouldn't come from home, but I didn't need it. I found validation elsewhere, in scores, in rankings, in the small, quiet pride I felt each time I won. To fund my future, I started working after school. Not in a trendy cafe like some students did, but at a small independent bookstore near campus. They also offered academic services, typing, printing, formatting for student reports. It wasn't glamorous. It paid little, but it was mine. I used the money to buy secondhand textbooks, save for application fees, and occasionally treat myself to new sketch pencils or a decent sandwich. My routine was brutal. Up at 6, school by 8, work from 4 to 8, homework until midnight. I skipped parties, birthdays, even sleep. Emily, meanwhile, enjoyed weekend trips, family-funded retreats, and every bit of emotional and financial support our parents could provide. She thrived in the spotlight. I thrived in the margins. When it came time to apply for college, both of us applied to Ashford University, a top-tier institution with a prestigious business and political science program. I spent weeks perfecting my application. Every essay was reviewed, edited, rewritten. I applied to every scholarship I qualified for, dug through forums for advice, and prayed. The day my acceptance letter arrived, I held it with trembling hands. I got in. I told my family quietly at dinner. Dad looked up from his phone. "That's nice, Ava." 15 minutes later, Emily burst through the door waving her own envelope, shrieking, "I got into Ashford." Suddenly, the room exploded with excitement. Sparkling cider appeared. Hugs were exchanged. Photos taken. No one remembered that I had said the exact same words moments before. I sat there, sipping quietly, invisible as always. 2 weeks later, we had a rare family dinner where everyone sat together. Dad cleared his throat. "We've been saving for college since Emily was a baby," he said. "Ashford isn't cheap, but her tuition is covered. She deserves to focus on her studies without distractions." I waited. Nothing. "What about me?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Mom sighed. "You've always been the independent one, sweetheart. Maybe start with community college. Or apply for aid. You're clever. You'll figure something out." Then came the blow that sealed it. "She deserves it, Ava. But you didn't." That night, something inside me broke. But from those broken pieces, I started building something new. I didn't cry that night. I didn't scream or slam doors. I went to my room, closed the door quietly behind me, and opened my laptop. If they weren't going to believe in me, then I'd just have to believe in myself twice as hard. I knew what it felt like to be ignored, dismissed, and overlooked. And now, I had no choice but to take that pain and turn it into fuel. The next few days were a blur of research. I combed through financial aid websites, federal grant portals, and private scholarships. I signed up for forums, downloaded application packets, and filled out every form I could find. I even started attending evening seminars online about how to finance college without family support. No one was holding my hand. No one was walking me through it. I was alone in this, but I had already been alone for years. The difference now was I had stopped waiting for someone to rescue me. While Emily was out shopping with Mom for dorm decor, I was working double shifts at the bookstore, printing senior theses and binding lab reports for minimum wage. I added editing services to my offerings and quietly built a little list of clients who relied on me to format, proofread, or type up their projects. I didn't advertise. I didn't have a website. But the work kept coming because I never missed a deadline, and I treated every job with the urgency of survival. Because for me, it was. A few weeks before the fall semester, I received the email that changed everything: a partial merit scholarship from Ashford. It wasn't a full ride, but it was enough to make it real. Combined with my savings, part-time job, and a federal student loan, I could make it through, barely. It wouldn't be easy, but it would be mine. Move-in day was a split-screen kind of morning. Emily left in Dad's SUV, surrounded by pillows, a mini fridge, and a fanfare of hugs and photos. I boarded a Greyhound bus with a single duffel bag, my laptop wrapped in a towel, and Dottie's worn leather journal tucked safely in the side pocket. It was raining lightly when I arrived at Ashford, but even through the drizzle, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Possibility. Ashford was everything I'd imagined. Stone buildings, winding paths, halls filled with the hum of ambition. No one here knew my story. No one saw me as Emily's sister. I could start from scratch. My assigned roommate was Brooke, a loud, unfiltered psychology major from Atlanta who owned 3 pairs of slippers and talked in her sleep. We couldn't have been more different, but she was kind. She asked questions. She remembered my name. On our first night, she said, "You seem like someone who's got her SH*T together." I laughed for the first time in weeks. Classes started, and the pressure hit like a wave. Most students around me came from prep schools and private academies. They quoted business theory like it was a second language. I came from public school, self-taught Excel, and YouTube tutorials. But I had something they didn't: grit. I wasn't afraid of long hours, of asking questions, of looking stupid if it meant learning. I sat in the front row, took meticulous notes, and attended every office hour whether I needed it or not. I wasn't the smartest in the room, but I worked like I had something to prove because I did. To stay afloat financially, I expanded my services. I offered resume formatting, citation cleanup, and presentation slides for group projects. My dorm desk became a mini office. I even helped some international students polish their English for class submissions. Slowly, word spread. Ava Morgan could help, and she was good. I never mentioned it to my family. Whenever Mom called, which wasn't often, she spoke about Emily, her new friends, her upcoming debate, her cute professor. I listened with the usual nods and one-word replies. I didn't bother to mention that I was tutoring MBA students on the side while carrying a full course load. It didn't matter. They weren't listening. Only Dottie knew. I called her every Sunday from the laundry room or a quiet bench under a tree. She wrote down every update in a notebook: GPA, clients served, scholarships applied for. "You're building something out of thin air, Ava," she told me once. "One day they'll see." In my sophomore year, I enrolled in a class called Entrepreneurial Fundamentals. It changed everything. The professor, Dr. Carter, was a woman who radiated power without raising her voice. She'd built 3 companies by the age of 35 and didn't suffer nonsense. From the first lecture, I was hooked. She didn't teach from textbooks. She taught from battle scars. She challenged us to think like founders, not students. Our midterm project was to pitch a business idea. While others presented food delivery apps or social networks for pet owners, I stood up and presented what I already had: a functioning, profitable academic support service with real clients, revenue, and scalability potential. I showed my spreadsheets, growth projections, and testimonials. When I finished, Dr. Carter leaned back in her chair and said, "You're not playing at business, Ava. You're already in it. Come see me after class." That one sentence rewired my world. I met with Dr. Carter that afternoon in her office, a sleek, sunlit space lined with startup books, framed news articles, and a whiteboard cluttered with diagrams that looked like blueprints for success. She asked me to walk her through everything: how I started my service, how I priced it, how I managed my time. I laid it all out, transparent and unpolished. I wasn't trying to impress her. I was just telling the truth. When I finished, she nodded slowly. "You've built more in your dorm room than some business majors build in 10 years. She paused, then added, "What do you want this to become?" That question stopped me. I had always seen my work as survival, a way to stay afloat, to stay in school, to pay the bills. I hadn't allowed myself to think beyond that. "I want to make it real," I said. "A real company. One that helps students like me who don't have a support system or the money for expensive academic services." Dr. Carter smiled. "Then let's make it real." She became my mentor. She connected me with the Campus Entrepreneurship Center, introduced me to alumni in the business space, and helped me register my business legally as AVA Digital. She pushed me to apply for student innovation grants and pitch competitions. She also taught me the one thing I'd never learned at home, that ambition wasn't shameful, that wanting more didn't make me arrogant. It made me ready. I spent the next year rebuilding my service from the ground up. I designed a basic website, created tiered packages, and started accepting payments through a secure system. I formed a small team, 2 graphic design students, 1 marketing major, and a computer science freshman who helped automate booking. We ran it like a real startup, even if our office was just a dorm room and our budget was practically zero. We focused on students who were struggling, not because they were lazy or incapable, but because no one had taught them how to succeed. First-generation students, ESL students, people who worked 2 jobs or sent money home, people like me. By the time junior year ended, AVA Digital had served over 150 clients from 7 universities. We didn't advertise with flashy campaigns. We grew through word of mouth, testimonials, and results. And for the first time in my life, I felt not just capable, but powerful. Academically, I was thriving. I maintained a 4.0 GPA, made the dean's list, and was selected as a teaching assistant for one of Dr. Carter's foundation courses. She let me run a few lectures, and I found myself at the front of classrooms, speaking confidently to rows of students, some older than me, about time management, productivity tools, and real-world applications of entrepreneurship. Meanwhile, my parents remained distant. Emily was now interning in Washington, D.C., and Mom sent me updates about her new boyfriend, her networking events, her chance of landing a fellowship. Dad barely called. When he did, it was brief. He asked if I was still doing that side hustle, as if AVA Digital were a lemonade stand, not a registered business with clients and team members. But their ignorance no longer stung. I didn't need them to see me. I had built my own spotlight. Only Dottie stayed connected. She still called every week, asking for updates, writing them down in her notebook. She had started calling it the Ava log. She said it gave her something to pray for every night, not for me to succeed, because she knew I would, but for me to stay strong in the face of all I carried. Then came the opportunity that would change everything, the National Collegiate Business Innovation Competition. It was one of the biggest student entrepreneurship events in the country. Thousands applied. A few dozen were selected. Dr. Carter sent me the link and said simply, "This has your name on it." I hesitated. The competition was fierce. Many finalists came from Ivy League schools, some with startup funding and corporate mentorships. But I applied anyway, submitting a full pitch deck, a case study, client feedback, and a growth plan. Weeks passed with no word. I told myself to forget about it. Then, one morning in February, I opened my email and froze. Congratulations, Ava Morgan. You've been selected as a finalist for the National Collegiate Business Innovation Competition. I stared at the screen for a long time, trying to let it sink in. I was going to New York, expenses paid, presenting my business to a panel of CEOs, venture capitalists, and industry leaders. I called Dottie first.
She cried.
I cried too. Not from fear or pressure, but from the realization that this thing I had built, this dream stitched together from scraps and pain and persistence, was finally being recognized. I spent the next 3 weeks preparing like my future depended on it, because in many ways it did. I refined every slide, practiced my pitch in front of anyone who would listen, and memorized my numbers backward and forward. I flew to New York with a thrifted blazer, a borrowed suitcase, and a heart that beat with more determination than nerves. I wasn't just there to compete. I was there to prove that you don't need privilege to innovate. You just need a reason. The day of the competition felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, with the wind whipping past and no way to know if the leap would end in a fall or flight. The venue was sleek and modern, the kind of place that echoed with the sound of ambition. I stood in a waiting room filled with polished students in designer suits, listening to them casually mention their seed funding, mentors at Fortune 500 companies, and summer placements in Silicon Valley. I clutched my notes and remembered the nights I fell asleep over textbooks at the bookstore, the mornings I skipped breakfast to save money for application fees. I had earned my place here, and I would act like it. When my turn came, I stepped into the presentation room and faced a panel of 5 judges seated behind a long table. Cameras rolled quietly in the background. I took a deep breath and began. I started not with the technical details of AVA Digital, but with a story, mine. I told them about the forgotten girl in the back of the classroom, the one who no one clapped for. I shared how I built my business out of necessity, how I served students who were overlooked like I had been, and how I turned an act of survival into an engine of empowerment. Then I laid out the business side. Our services, our growth model, our retention rates, and our plans for scalable online platforms. I spoke for exactly 10 minutes, ending with this line: "Success isn't about who has the most. It's about who builds the most with what they have." There was a long pause after I finished. One of the judges, a woman with silver hair and sharp eyes, finally said, "That was the first time today someone made me feel something. Thank you." I left the room not knowing whether I would win, but knowing I had told my truth. The award ceremony was held later that evening in a candlelit banquet hall. Finalists sat at round tables, the tension thick as names were called out for honorable mentions and runner-up positions. When they finally reached the first prize, the announcer took a pause, smiled, and said, "This year's winner didn't just build a business. She built a movement." The first place award for innovation goes to Ava Morgan, founder of AVA Digital. I didn't hear the applause. I didn't even feel my legs move as I walked to the stage. I only remember the weight of the trophy in my hands and the flash of cameras as I stood beneath a banner that read National Business Innovation Champion. When I returned to campus, everything changed. The school newspaper featured my story. Dr. Carter hosted a private event to honor my win. President Foster invited me to lunch, the same president who once walked past me like I was any other scholarship kid. Dean Martin of the business school called me one of the brightest lights to come out of Ashford in years. Even Emily texted me, "Saw the article. Congrats. That's actually really cool." I didn't need her approval, but it felt different this time. Not pity, not sarcasm. Maybe, finally, a sliver of respect. Senior year passed in a blur of opportunity. AVA Digital expanded to 3 new campuses. We hired part-time reps, launched an online portal, and introduced discounted services for students with demonstrated need. I applied for and won a state innovation grant to build a dedicated app for academic planning and peer mentoring. My inbox filled with partnership offers and internship invitations. I declined most of them. I wasn't looking for a corporate job. I was building something bigger. 1 week before graduation, I received an email from Miss Parker in financial aid. She had been the one to help me navigate my first loan forms as a freshman. Her email subject line read, "Scholarship Proposal." Inside, she wrote, "Ava, after reviewing your journey and achievements, the university is proposing the establishment of a named scholarship fund in your honor, the Ava Morgan Award. It would support first-generation students with demonstrated need and entrepreneurial spirit. We'd like to launch it this fall with your approval." I stared at the screen for a long time. I thought of that scared, silenced girl who sat at the family dinner table and was told, "She deserved it, but you didn't." And now, my name would be on a scholarship that would tell other girls like her, "Yes, you do." I replied with one word: approved. Graduation day arrived with golden sunlight and nervous smiles. I wore my cap and gown like armor. I stood in line with my peers, each of us about to step out into the world. When my name was called, Ava Morgan, summa cum laude, founder of AVA Digital, recipient of the National Innovation Award, the applause echoed like something earned, not granted. But it wasn't just the degree I walked away with that day. It was everything I had built when no one believed in me. It was every night I'd stayed up when others slept, every job I took, every word I wrote when no one was listening. It was the start of something much bigger. After graduation, while many of my classmates took jobs in finance, consulting, or tech, I made a different choice. I decided to go full-time with AVA Digital. Not because I wanted to avoid the corporate world. I'd already been offered multiple positions at top firms, but because I believed in what I'd built. I had created something from the ground up, something rooted in my experience, my struggle, and my refusal to give up. And I wanted to see how far it could go. I rented a small office space in a shared startup hub in the city, Nothing fancy, just a desk, a whiteboard, and a strong Wi-Fi connection. My first hires were people I trusted. Brooke, my old roommate, now a licensed therapist, joined to develop our student support wing. One of my AVA digital interns from Ashford became our first project coordinator. We expanded our services beyond academic support, now offering time management coaching, stress management resources, mentorship pairing, and financial aid guidance. By year's end, AVA Digital had partnered with 5 universities and supported more than 700 students. I was invited to speak at youth summits, college fairs, and entrepreneur panels. My story, once something I had tucked away in silence, was now being shared on podcasts, blogs, and news outlets. I wasn't trying to be inspirational. I was trying to be useful. I wanted students who were invisible like I had been to know they weren't alone. That they could build something. That they could win. One rainy afternoon in March, I returned to Dottie's lake house. She had slowed down in recent years, her walk shorter, her voice a bit softer. But her spirit? Unchanged. We sat on the same dock we had shared so many times. She wrapped her shawl tightly and held my hand. "You always had it in you, Ava," she said, her voice raspy but clear. They just didn't know where to look. I showed her photos from the AVA digital offices, the awards, the students we'd helped. She looked at them like a proud general surveying her army. When I told her about the scholarship in my name, her eyes welled up. "Your name will help someone else be seen," she whispered. "That's the best kind of legacy." Later that evening, I found her notebook, the Ava log. Every call, every milestone, every quote I'd said to her over the years, it was all there. She had believed in me long before I believed in myself. I hugged her that night with a quiet gratitude that words couldn't hold. That fall, AVA Digital launched its national initiative, Project Ignite. Our goal was to offer free digital academic coaching to 10 underserved high schools across the U.S. I flew to Texas, Chicago, and North Carolina, meeting students who reminded me of myself, tired, determined, full of potential but lacking support. We gave them tools, but more than that, we gave them belief. The Ava Morgan Award doubled its recipients in the second year, and Ashford University invited me to speak at their annual Women in Leadership event. Standing at that podium, I looked out into the crowd and saw young faces, some of them with that same flicker of loneliness I used to carry, and I told them, success is not about having everything. It's about making something out of the nothing you were handed. And once you make it, reach back. Light the path for someone else. One evening, while walking across the campus I once felt invisible on, I passed by the library. Through the window, I spotted a girl sitting alone at a table, her laptop open, papers everywhere, and a look of exhaustion on her face I knew too well. I quietly stepped inside, walked past her without a word, and left a folded note beside her mousepad before slipping out. It read, "You're not alone. I was here once too.
Keep going."
AM. Because that's what I had needed. Just one voice saying, "You can." I've learned that sometimes the loudest success stories don't come from those born into applause. They come from those who learned to clap for themselves in silence, who turned rejection into drive, and who used every no as the beginning of their own yes. I was never chosen. So I chose myself. And I've never looked back. If this story moved you, don't forget to like the video and leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Make sure to subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories like this one, uploaded regularly. Your support helps keep these stories coming. Thank you for watching.